Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor E. Frankl. Introduction. Imagine this. You've been traveling for days, crammed into a train car with 80 other people, so tightly packed you can barely breathe. The air is thick with fear. For days, you've held on to a sliver of hope that you're being sent to a munitions factory, a labor camp, anything but the place whispered about in hushed, terrified tones. Then, the train slows. Through the grimy window, a sign comes into view. A single word: Auschwitz. In that moment, a collective heart stops. Everyone knows what that name means. Gas chambers, crematoriums, massacres. You're herded off the train and forced into two lines, men on one side, women on the other. A single SS officer stands with an air of careless ease, and with a flick of his finger, he points. Right or left? No one understands the sinister meaning of this finger game, but a whisper goes through the line: right means you're fit for work. Left, well, left is for the sick and weak. The man pointing the finger, deciding your existence with a single gesture, is Drive. Yosef Mengele. And the young psychiatrist standing before him, trying to look smart and capable, is Viktor Frankl. The officer hesitates, puts his hands on Frankl's shoulders, and slowly turns him to the right. He later learns that 90% of the people on his transport were sent to the left. Within hours, they were dead. His friend, his colleagues, gone. When he asked where they were, a seasoned prisoner pointed to a chimney belching a column of flame into the gray Polish sky. "That's where your friend is," he said, floating up to heaven. This is where our story begins. Not with a philosopher in a comfortable armchair, but with a man in the deepest abyss of human suffering. The book we're exploring today, Man's Search for Meaning, was forged in that fire. It has sold over 12 million copies worldwide and has been named one of the 10 most influential books in America. Its author, Viktor Frankl, was a brilliant psychiatrist before the war, and he chose to stay in Vienna with his elderly parents when he had a visa to escape to America. He paid the price for that choice, losing his parents, his brother, and his pregnant wife in the camps. And yet, the book he wrote is not a story of despair. It is one of the most profound testaments to hope ever written. It answers a question that haunts every single one of us at some point in our lives. How do you find meaning when everything has been taken from you? How do you say yes to life, even in the face of unimaginable suffering? Stick with me, and by the end of our time together, you will understand the one freedom that no one, no circumstance, no tragedy, no person, can ever take from you. You will discover the secret that allowed men to walk into gas chambers with their heads held high, and you will learn how to apply that same secret to find unbreakable meaning in your own life, right here, right now. Book summary. When Viktor Frankl arrived at Auschwitz, the process of dehumanization began immediately. Every possession was taken away. His head was shaved, his body shorn of all hair. His name was replaced with a number, 119,104, tattooed on his skin. But the most significant loss, for him, was a manuscript hidden in his coat pocket. His life's work, the book that was meant to introduce his groundbreaking theory of psychotherapy. He tried to explain its importance to a seasoned prisoner, pleading to keep it. The man's face twisted into a grin, pity, then mockery, and he bellowed a single word that shattered Frankl's last connection to his old life: shit. In that moment, Frankl said, I struck out my whole former life. The first phase of his psychological reaction had begun: shock. It's a strange thing, the human mind. Frankl observed that in the face of absolute horror, many prisoners experienced what he called a delusion of reprieve. They saw other prisoners who looked well-fed and clung to the hope that things wouldn't be so bad. They couldn't yet grasp the reality. That first night, As they were herded into showers, some even felt relief, noting that real water came from the sprays. At least it wasn't a gas chamber. This, Frankl explains, is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Faced with a horror too immense to comprehend, the mind protects itself with a grim curiosity, a sense of detachment. You observe your own suffering as if you were watching a movie. But this shock couldn't last. As the days turned into weeks, it was replaced by the second phase, apathy. An emotional death. This wasn't laziness or weakness, it was a necessary protective shell. You're standing in the freezing cold for roll call. You hear a scream. A fellow prisoner is knocked down, pulled up, and knocked down again, simply for trying to go to sickbay at the wrong time. The first time you see this, you look away in horror. A few weeks later, you don't even flinch. You watch, unmoved, as prisoners swarm a still warm corpse to steal his scraps of potato or his worn-out shoes. The daily, hourly beatings, the injustice, the constant presence of death, it all becomes numbingly normal. Disgust, pity, and horror are emotions you simply can't afford to feel anymore. Life shrinks down to a single, primitive focus: survival. Preserving your own life and that of the man next to you. The prisoner's dreams were not of freedom or revenge, but of bread, cake, and warm baths. Their conversations, whispered in the trenches while digging frozen earth, were about their favorite meals and recipes for the day they would finally be home. Frankl recalls one night being woken by the groans of a prisoner having a terrible nightmare. He reached out to wake the man, but then he stopped, frozen by a sudden realization: no dream, no matter how horrible, could be as bad as the reality of the camp he was about to wake him up to. And this is the point where most stories of survival would end. A story of human beings reduced to their most basic animal instincts. But this is where Frankl's story truly begins. Because what he discovered, in himself and in others, was that even in the depths of this degradation, something else was possible. A deeper, richer inner life could emerge. He writes that sensitive people, who were used to a life of the mind, often suffered more physically, but the damage to their inner selves was less. They were able to retreat from their terrible surroundings into a life of inner riches and spiritual freedom. And how did they do this? Frankl identifies three powerful sources of meaning that became lifelines in the darkness. The first was love. One morning, stumbling through the dark and icy wind on a miles-long march to a worksite, a man next to him whispered, "If our wives could see us now." And that single thought sparked an image of Frankl's own wife in his mind. He imagined her with uncanny clarity, her smile, her encouraging look. He began a silent conversation with her. And in that moment, a profound truth struck him. He writes, "For the first time in my life I saw the truth. The salvation of man is through love and in love." He understood that a man who has nothing left in this world can still know bliss, even for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. He didn't know if his wife was even alive, and, as it turned out, she wasn't, but at that moment, it didn't matter. Love, he realized, transcends the physical person. It finds its deepest meaning in their spiritual being, their inner self. In the bleakest of moments, his inner life, his connection to his wife's image, was more real and more luminous than the suffering around him. The second source of meaning was the appreciation of beauty, in nature and in art. It seems almost impossible to imagine, but even in the camps, moments of profound beauty could break through. Frankl describes a journey from Auschwitz to another camp. The prisoners, who had given up all hope of life, were crammed into a carriage, peering through the small, barred windows. As they passed the mountains of Salzburg, their summits glowing in the sunset, they were utterly captivated by the beauty they had missed for so long. One evening, back in the mud huts, a fellow prisoner rushed in, urging everyone to come out and see the wonderful sunset. They stood in silence, watching the sky alive with clouds of ever-changing colors, from steel blue to blood red, reflected in the puddles on the muddy ground. And one prisoner said to another, "How beautiful the world could be." Even a simple song could provide a lifeline. In the evenings, a makeshift cabaret might be held. Another time, a prisoner would sing Italian arias during the lunch break, and for a few minutes, the others would forget their hunger and their exhaustion, transported by the music. These small moments were not just distractions, they were a form of spiritual resistance. They were a reminder that a world of beauty, art, and dignity still existed beyond the barbed wire, and that a part of that world could be carried within. The third source of meaning, and perhaps the most surprising, was humor. Humor, Frankl says, was another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. More than anything else, it can provide a sense of detachment, an ability to rise above your situation, even if only for a few seconds. He and a friend made a pact to invent at least one amusing story each day, imagining funny situations that might happen after their liberation. He, a surgeon, might be back in an operating room when an orderly bursts in shouting, "Action! Action!" the same command the foreman used to make them work faster. This wasn't about ignoring the suffering. It was about mastering the art of living even in a concentration camp. Frankl compares suffering to the behavior of a gas. If you pump gas into a chamber, it will fill the entire space, no matter how big the chamber is. In the same way, suffering fills the human soul completely, whether the suffering is great or small. This is why the size of suffering is relative. And because of this, a very small thing can bring the greatest joy. The prisoners performed a dance of joy in the train car when they realized their transport was heading only for Dachau, not the dreaded Mauthausen. Why? Because they heard Dachau didn't have a gas chamber. The relativity of their suffering made this small mercy feel like a monumental victory. Love, beauty, and humor were lifelines. But they all point to a deeper, more fundamental discovery that is the very heart of this book. Frankl realized that while the Nazis could control his environment, take his possessions, starve his body, and kill his family, there was one thing they could never touch. He writes, in what is perhaps the most famous passage of the book, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." This wasn't just a theory. He saw it in action. He remembers the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few, but they were living proof that you could overcome apathy and suppress irritability. They proved that a human being can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom and independence of mind, even under such terrible physical and psychic stress. Every day, every hour, offered a choice. A decision whether or not you would submit to the powers that threaten to rob you of your inner self. Would you become a plaything of circumstance, molded into the form of the typical inmate? Or would you retain your human dignity? The sort of person a prisoner became, Frankl concluded, was the result of an inner decision, not just the influence of the camp. This profound realization formed the basis of the psychotherapeutic school he would later found, logotherapy. The word logos is Greek for meaning, and logotherapy is built on a simple but revolutionary idea. The primary driving force in human beings is not the pursuit of pleasure, as Freud believed, or the pursuit of power, as Adler taught. It is the pursuit of meaning. Our deepest need is for what Frankl calls a will to meaning. In the camps, this was a matter of life and death. The prisoner who had lost faith in the future was doomed. Once they could no longer see a goal, a why for their existence, they would decline mentally and physically. Frankl tells the haunting story of a block warden, a well-known composer, who confided in him about a dream. A voice had told him that the war would be over for him on March 30th. He was full of hope. But as the day approached, the war news was bleak. On March 29th, he fell ill with a high fever. On March 30th, he became delirious. And on March 31st, he was dead. His loss of hope, the severe disappointment, lowered his body's resistance to a latent typhus infection, and he died. This story perfectly illustrates the book's central mantra, a quote from the philosopher Nietzsche that Frankl returns to again and again: "He who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how." The crucial task for anyone, whether in a concentration camp or in the comfort of modern life, is to find their why. This led Frankl to a fundamental shift in perspective. We are so used to asking, "What can I expect from life?" We feel that life owes us happiness, success, and comfort. But Frankl says we have the question entirely backward. We must stop asking about the meaning of life, and instead, think of ourselves as those who are being questioned by life, daily and hourly. Life is asking us what we are going to do. Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and right conduct. So, how do we answer? Where do we find this meaning that life is asking of us? Frankl outlines 3 primary paths. First, by creating a work or doing a deed. This is the most straightforward path, finding meaning through achievement, through building something, creating art, or contributing to the world through our work. Frankl himself found his why in his intense desire to reconstruct his lost manuscript. Second, by experiencing something or encountering someone. This is the path of love, beauty, and truth. Meaning can be found in appreciating a sunset, as the prisoners did, or in loving another human being in their uniqueness. Love, Frankl says, is the only way to grasp another person in the innermost core of their personality. But it is the third path that is the most profound, and the most relevant to his experience. We can find meaning in the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. When we are faced with a situation we cannot change, like an incurable disease, or the loss of a loved one, or being imprisoned in a concentration camp, we are challenged to change ourselves. Suffering, in and of itself, is meaningless. But we give it meaning by the way we respond to it. We can remain brave, dignified, and unselfish. Or, in the bitter fight for self-preservation, we can forget our human dignity and become no more than an animal. In that choice lies our ultimate freedom. Frankl tells a beautiful story from his post-war practice that illustrates this perfectly. An elderly doctor came to him, severely depressed over the death of his wife 2 years prior. Frankl didn't offer him platitudes. Instead, he asked a question: "What would have happened, doctor, if you had died first, and your wife had to survive you?" The doctor replied, "Oh, for her this would have been terrible. How she would have suffered." Frankl then gently said, "You see, doctor, such a suffering has been spared her, and it is you who have spared her this suffering, at the price that now you have to survive and mourn her." The doctor said nothing, shook Frankl's hand, and calmly left. His suffering hadn't been taken away, but his attitude toward it had been transformed. It now had a meaning. It was a sacrifice for the person he loved. As Frankl writes, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. This journey through the 3 phases of camp life, shock, apathy, and the eventual rediscovery of an inner life, culminates in the 3rd and final stage, the psychology of the prisoner after liberation. You would think the moment of freedom would be one of explosive, unadulterated joy. But it wasn't. When the camp gates were finally opened, the prisoners walked out timidly. They saw meadows full of flowers, but they had no feelings about them. Frankl says they had literally lost the ability to feel pleased and had to relearn it slowly. He calls this state depersonalization. For years, they had dreamed of freedom, but now that it was real, they couldn't grasp it. It felt like a dream they would soon be jolted from by a whistle blast. As feeling slowly returned, it brought with it two new dangers that threatened the character of the liberated man. The first was bitterness. Upon returning home, they were often met with hackneyed phrases, "We did not know about it," or "We, too, have suffered." This superficiality was infuriating. The second danger was disillusionment. This was not caused by other people, but by fate itself. A man who thought he had reached the absolute limit of suffering found that suffering has no limits. For years, he had held on to the image of a loved one waiting for him. That image gave him the courage to endure. But what happened to the man who returned home to find that the person he lived for no longer existed? Woe to him who found his dream day was so different from what he longed for. And yet, for those who made it through this final trial, there came a crowning experience. The wonderful feeling that after everything they had suffered, there was nothing left to fear anymore, except God. They had walked through the deepest hell and come out the other side. They were, finally and truly, free. Commentary. It's difficult to talk about a book like Man's Search for Meaning without feeling a sense of profound humility. It's more than a book, it's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In a world today that is so often focused on the pursuit of happiness, a world that tells us to avoid pain and discomfort at all costs, Viktor Frankl's message is more radical and more necessary than ever. He teaches us that meaning isn't found in a life without suffering. Meaning is what we forge in spite of suffering. It's not something we discover, like finding a lost key. It's something we build, moment by moment, through the choices we make and the attitudes we adopt. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the fundamental shift in perspective he demands. We spend so much of our lives asking, "What will make me happy? What can I get out of this situation? What does life have in store for me?" Frankl flips the script entirely. He says the question isn't what we expect from life, but what life expects from us. Think about that. It reframes every single challenge. A difficult class isn't just an obstacle to get through. It's life asking you, can you be disciplined? Can you learn? A conflict with a friend isn't just a problem. It's life asking, can you be compassionate? Can you forgive? A moment of unavoidable frustration, like being stuck in traffic, isn't just an annoyance. It's life asking, can you be patient? Frankl's wisdom isn't just for the grand, tragic moments of life. It's for the everyday. And that's where we can begin to practice it. Here are a few simple ways to bring his lessons into your life, starting today. First, practice the reframe. The next time you face a small, unavoidable frustration, a canceled plan, a long line at the store, a computer crash, catch yourself before you react with anger. Take a breath and ask that Franklian question, what is this situation asking of me right now? Maybe it's asking for patience. Maybe it's asking for creativity to find a different solution. By choosing your attitude, you take back your power. You turn a moment of suffering into a moment of strength. Second, identify your why. What gives your life meaning? Frankl showed that a future goal is essential for our psychological survival. Take 5 minutes and write down the 1 to 3 things that serve as your why. Is it a person you love and feel responsible for? Is it a creative project you are passionate about finishing? Is it a value, like kindness or justice, that you want to bring into the world? This isn't about having your whole life figured out. It's about having an anchor. When the how of life gets tough, when you're tired or discouraged, that why is what will pull you through. Finally, perform a self-transcendent act. Frankl taught that true meaning is found when we forget ourselves and direct our attention outward, to a cause to serve or another person to love. So today, do one small thing for someone else with no expectation of getting anything in return. It could be as simple as truly listening to a friend without interrupting, helping a family member with a chore without being asked, or offering a genuine compliment to a stranger. In that small act of giving, you will find a taste of the profound meaning Frankl is talking about. Viktor Frankl's life is proof that his ideas are not just elegant theories. He lived them. He chose to find meaning in his suffering, to help his fellow prisoners, and to dedicate his life after the camps to healing the souls of others. He reminds us that man is not just the being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. He is also the being who entered those gas chambers upright, with a prayer on his lips. We all have both potentialities within us, the swine and the saint. Which one we become depends not on our conditions, but on our decisions. The ultimate message of this book is one of defiant hope. It is a declaration that even in the darkest of nights, we hold a flicker of light in our hands, the last of the human freedoms, the freedom to choose our way. And in that choice lies our meaning. That was book summary of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. We've hit the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, grab a copy, because reading it isn't just learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself in your daily life. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into another life-changing book in Billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing.